The emergency call from the school came in broken sobs. A teenage student was hiding in a bathroom while magic beasts moved through the halls outside. The call center staffer tried to keep her calm, asking what the monsters looked like. If they relied only on sight, hiding might save her. Through her tears, the girl described human-like bodies, ugly faces, and green skin. Orcs. The staffer's voice changed at once. Run, because orcs don't hunt by sight alone, they track prey by smell. If this source-faithful solo-leveling read is working for you, leave a like, drop a comment with the moment you think will break first, and subscribe so you are here when the next gate opens. Patreon members get early access to upcoming episodes and help cover the AI narration, subtitles, thumbnails, and rendering that keep this project moving. Before that desperate call reached anyone, the Knights Guild had a permit problem it could not solve with paperwork alone. Yoontae told his boss, I was told yesterday that it'd be difficult for us to get the permit for the gate. Jongsu, the guildmaster of the Knights Guild, had his mood soured as soon as he arrived at work. Jongsu snapped back. What? Yoontae, the vice master, quickly explained. The association's evaluation came out higher than they expected. Jongsu asked, Is it an S-rank gate? Yoontae answered, No, but it's a max-level A rank. Jongsu muttered, What a pain in the ass. S-rank gates they could pass on easily. The Knights Guild had no S-ranks in their roster, so it would be impossible for them. Jeju Island had made it clear that you'd need all of South Korea's S-rank hunters for that. However, A-rank gates were a different story. People would talk if the Knights, a top 5 guild, couldn't handle an A-rank gate. The guild was already on shaky ground, and this could leave them with none to stand on at all. Yoontae asked, What are we going to do, boss? Jongsu said, I'm not sure yet. Yoontae warned him, If we pass on the gate, the Fame Guild will take it for sure. The Fame Guild of the Hanam area. Jongsu's eye twitched at the mere mention. Jongsu snapped, This gate is on our turf, and you want to hand it over to Dongwook Ma on a silver platter. Yoontae said, I'm just saying, boss. Jongsu said, Over my dead body. Yoontae asked, So you're going for it? Enraged, Jongsu bit his lip. It was clear why he did. It was best he refrained from blurting anything out when he was this worked up, since the lives of his guild members were on the line. He could feel a headache coming on. Jongsu reminded himself that the Knights' A-rank hunters were as good as anyone from the larger guilds. Both the quality and quantity of their A-rank hunters were comparable to the Hunters Guild, the best in Korea. The only issue was their lack of S-rank hunters. The Knights Guild was in danger of dropping out of the top 5 solely because they lacked a single S-rank. Their elite members could easily take care of the average A-rank gate, but if the magic power of the gate was on the high end, their hunters would be risking their lives because of the lack of S-rank hunters, since the level of difficulty for such gates was closer to that of S-rank despite the A-rank classification. Hence why the Hunters Association was on the fence on whether to grant them the raid permit. Jongsu kept racking his brain. As Jongsu continued racking his brain, Yoontae spoke up cautiously. Boss, we'll be done for if it turns out to be a red gate. Jongsu admitted, That's true. An upper A-rank gate was enough of a problem, but if it turned into a red gate, the mere thought was horrifying. If they were lucky, maybe half of them would survive. Otherwise, the entire strike squad, including Jongsu himself, would lose their lives. The smart thing to do would be to let it go. However, their fate would be sealed if word got out that they'd given up an A-rank gate. What rookie would be willing to join a guild that didn't have an S-rank hunter and couldn't even clear an A-rank gate? Yoontae suggested, How about we team up with another guild? Jongsu shook his head. Why would they agree knowing we only asked them because we couldn't handle it ourselves? Especially not when they could take the gate for themselves without bothering to involve anyone else. And even if another guild agreed to join forces, there'd be yet another problem. It would advertise to everyone that the knights were incompetent. As the two men grew more concerned, Yerim suggested from the side of the room, If not another guild, then what about another person? The men turned toward the female voice coming from the side of the room. It was Yerim Young, the A-rank healer assigned to the head strike squad. Healers got a huge say in matters regarding raids, especially if the healer was an A-rank with a variety of skills like Yerim. Unfortunately, with the fate of the Knights Guild hanging in the balance, it was difficult for Jongsu to hide his helplessness. We're going inside a top-level A-rank gate, so what help would an individual... Jongsu stopped. Oh. The face popped into his head of a man who could wipe out not only A-rank but also S-rank magic beasts all on his own. Jongsu was so excited that he jumped out of his seat. The thought hit Jongsu all at once. What if Jinwoo Sung joined them on the raid? The man was able to easily defeat a magic beast that an entire group of S-rank hunters couldn't. If Jinwoo helped them, the safety of their squad members would be guaranteed. And that wasn't all. The Knights Guild would avoid the stigma of needing another guild's help. This would even boost the Knights' reputation. There was no downside to this. It would save the lives of their team members as well as restore the honor of the Knights Guild. Talk about killing two birds with one stone. Jongsu giddily asked, "What's Hunter Sung up to these days?" Neither Yerim, who had proposed the initial idea, nor Yuntae, who had been listening quietly, had a clue. Other than clearing that gate that appeared in the middle of the road, he's been pretty quiet, Yuntae said, recalling something he'd seen on the news recently. He took out his cell phone. "Should I look up his contact info, boss?" Jongsu said, "No, that's okay. Don't bother." Yuntae blinked. "What?" Jongsu said, "We can't do something this important over the phone. We have to talk to him in person," Yuntae said. "I see." Jongsu grinned at Yuntae. "We're going to Seoul." That night, Haein burrowed under her blanket and kicked herself in embarrassment. Haein thought back in horror. "I think so? Did I really say I think so?" That was basically a confession. She flailed around for a bit but suddenly froze as a thought crossed her mind. But then, how should Haein interpret Jinwoo's response? She remembered Jinwoo's response. Then isn't there a better way to handle this than joining the guild? At the time, Haein had said she'd think about it in order to flee. Her brain stopped working every time she reflected on that moment. She flushed as she unwittingly recalled it again. When Haein had looked upon the crazed eyes of the enlarged minion, she'd felt as though death was inevitable. She'd felt absolute fear of the destiny of those who were prey. Haein had squeezed her eyes shut after seeing his claws coming at her from either side. But at that moment, she'd felt warmth behind her, and a familiar scent had wrapped itself around her. Oh. Haein had slowly opened her eyes and looked over her shoulder to see Jinwoo standing there, gripping the minion's claws and glowering at him. It was true that moment had made her heart pound. However, then she remembered his question. "I have to ask, do you have a thing for me or something?" Asking that question in that moment was cheating, wasn't it? Wait, no. Haein shook her head vigorously as if trying to banish the notion. Even if Jinwoo had asked, she shouldn't have answered honestly, since he could think of me as a freak. But she hadn't meant to. Despite telling herself to keep quiet, her mouth had opened of its own accord. It had happened only because she felt relaxed around him, like she wasn't herself, like I'm not myself. For some reason, those words sounded familiar to Haein, but from where? She'd definitely heard something similar before. And then, a memory that had been erased brushed through her mind. A faint remembered voice whispered, "Please tell him." Haein bolted upright. The memory hit Haein all at once. It definitely hadn't been that long ago. But the faint voice calling out from deep within her memories was similar to the sensation of having just woken up and trying to remember the dream she'd been having. The remembered voice continued, "Please tell him that Haein tried to pull up the memory of whose voice this was as well as the contents of the message. It was hazy, as if it was surrounded by a thick fog, but it was gradually starting to take shape. The voice finally took shape. "Please tell him that he needs to be careful. I met Hunter Byung-gu Min when she was unconscious and had fallen into an endless darkness. The one who had pulled her out was Byung-gu. At first it had felt unpleasant as the peaceful darkness was disrupted, but that feeling hadn't lasted. She had found it strange that Byung-gu was wearing black armor. The only part of him she could make out was his face, but his expression had been uncharacteristically sad. Haein felt a sudden chill run down her spine as she processed these memories. Byung-gu had looked like he was trying not to cry as he spoke. Byung-gu had said, "Tell Hunter Jinwoo Sung. Tell Hunter Jinwoo Sung. Please tell him that he needs to be careful of the power he possesses." I stood in front of the bathroom mirror after my shower. I certainly looked pretty good, but I still couldn't believe someone as beautiful as Haein had feelings for me and would be willing to change guilds for me. Am I that attractive? I smirked as I continued staring into the mirror. I wasn't in any danger of becoming a vain, narcissistic person, but I did have one thing I was immensely proud of. As a result of not missing a single daily quest, I had bulked up quite a bit. and whether it was due to the system, I was definitely taller than before. But that just meant my body was the only thing I had going for me. My face was, well, apart from my steely gaze, I looked like the average guy on the street. However, wait a minute. My gaze turned serious as I peered at my reflection. I leaned forward to take a closer look. The Jinwoo in the mirror and the real Jinwoo stared at each other for a while. I'd found something interesting. I examined every part of my face, and as I suspected, things had definitely changed. My scars, moles, and blemishes had never been very pronounced, but they were nonetheless completely gone. Is this from the Spirit of Rehabilitation buff? One of the buffs I had received as a reward for becoming a player was that any damage to my body would be repaired. The buff was powerful enough to regenerate the leg that had been severed by the stone statue, so the buff could definitely have improved my complexion as well. The thing that caught my eye was, I'm pretty sure I look younger than before. I was in my mid-20s, but inspecting myself now, I figured I could be easily mistaken for someone in my early 20s or so. How amazing. I'd heard that mana slowed down and awakened beings aging, so perhaps this was a similar effect. Okay, that's enough. It felt silly to be staring at myself in the mirror for this long, so I exited the bathroom. Jinah happened to emerge from her bedroom at the same time, so we entered the living room together. I grinned and called to her. Hey. What do you think about your big brother?
What about you?
Like how attractive I am as a man.
Huh?
Jinah raised an eyebrow.
Where is all this unfounded confidence coming from? To me, you're just the same old brother I've always had.
Well, gosh, thanks. I pinched her cheek and she retaliated with her usual kick in the shin. Of course, she only hurt herself in the process. Have you already forgotten who I am? How do you study with that brain of yours?
Excuse you.
Jinah pouted and glared at me.
I was first place in the entire school on the last mock exam, I'll have you know.
I was amused by her reaction but tried not to laugh. One of the wonderful things about family was they treated you the same no matter how much you changed. I dried my wet hair with a towel as I walked past my sister. Keep up the good work.
You too.
I was about to go back to my room when I remembered something. Oh yeah, I'm thinking of forming a guild.
Whoa!
Jinah's eyes twinkled in excitement.
Are people gonna call you Mr. President now?
If everything goes well.
What's the name of your guild?
I kind of wanted to ask you about that.
Ooh, what is it? What is it?
Seeing her filled with anticipation, I cautiously asked, what do you think of SoloPlay Guild?
Huh?
The contents of her response were the same as when we'd been joking around, but the tone was completely different. Gone was the playful teasing. Her confusion was genuine this time. Why, does it sound weird?
Why would you name your guild that?
Because I like to work alone.
It definitely fits you, but it doesn't really work with your guild.
Why not?
Don't you summon those soldiers in black armor?
Yeah.
So technically you don't fight alone.
She had a point. I nodded. Even though to me it's just one of my skills, other people don't see it that way. That made sense. This guild might be part of my life forever, so I wanted a name that properly represented me, hence SoloPlay, but if it's not resonating with others, then it doesn't matter. I needed something that represented me. I thought of something else. How about Ahjin Guild?
Ahjin?
Jinah tried saying the name aloud and brightened.
It sounds like you just flipped my name so I can get behind it. What does it mean?
It's combining the Chinese characters for myself and moving forward. It was a name that made it clear this was something only I could do, and a name I'd like to attach to the guild I plan to move forward with. When you combine the characters together, it makes Ahjin, meaning I move forward.
Aww.
Jinah gave me the best compliment she could give.
That's not bad, I guess.
The next day, I went to the office to propose the new name. So about the guild name, Jinwoo, who had been in the office all morning, smiled brightly.
I really like it, boss.
Just as how a swan looks peaceful floating on the surface of a lake, but its feet are desperately kicking like crazy underwater, so too was Jinwoo. Jinwoo thought, I'm fine with whatever as long as it's not solo play. He had thought long and hard about it, but introducing himself as Jinwoo, vice president of the SoloPlay Guild, physically hurt him. Jinwoo didn't know why, but he could actually feel pain on one side of his chest. But how could he complain about a name his beloved boss had worked hard to come up with? So just as he'd resigned himself to his fate, along came a fleeting opportunity.
Let's go with that, boss.
With his partner's endorsement, the name was settled. That's taken care of. In his mind, Jinwoo was screaming for joy. I rubbed my chin in thought. So all that's left is finding the last founding member.
Oh, about that.
Yeah?
What happened with Hunter Cha yesterday?
Hunter Cha won't be joining us. She's not what I'm looking for. He? Jinwoo swallowed his gasp. He knew Jinwoo had high standards, but he couldn't understand how he wasn't satisfied with a hunter like Haein. She was an S rank, young, and her abilities were amazing, bar none. On top of that, she was gorgeous. No matter how he looked at it, he couldn't figure out why she hadn't made the cut. That was, of course, by looking at it from an ordinary person's perspective. Jinwoo was anything but ordinary. He took down an S-rank magic beast almost entirely by himself on his first official raid after being re-evaluated. It made sense that Jinwoo wouldn't settle for just a mid-tier S-rank hunter. But then what kind of hunter would meet his standards? Several hundred had applied to their guild after seeing Jinwoo's name in the description. But Jinwoo had a feeling none of them would do. Jinwoo thought, I don't think we'll ever find a better candidate than Hunter Chai. Jinwoo was concerned that they'd never set up shop at this rate, so he carefully asked.
Boss? What kind of person are you looking for?
Someone with a hunter's license but no interest in the guild's activities, and someone we can trust.
Huh?
Jinwoo knew the perfect fit. Jinwoo thought, that sounds like... But at that moment, knock, knock, someone was at the office door.
Who is it?
Jinwoo opened it to reveal two unfamiliar men standing there awkwardly. It was Jongsu and Yoontae, the guildmaster and vice master of the Knights Guild respectively. They had come to Seoul on a whim to meet with me. Jongsu smiled brightly when he recognized me. Oh, you're here. I stood up. And you are? Apologies, I haven't even introduced myself. Jongsu strode over to me and politely stretched out his hand. I'm Jongsu Park, the guildmaster of the Knights. I nodded. No wonder Jongsu seemed familiar. Even people who weren't that interested in the world of hunters would recognize the masters of the top 5 guilds. They were on TV often enough. But the Knights Guild was located in Busan, on the opposite side of South Korea. I looked quizzically at them. What brings you here? So the thing is, Jongsu hesitated and exchanged glances with Yoontae before speaking with much difficulty. Jongsu steeled himself and got to the point. We have to take care of this pretty big A-rank gate, and may we have a minute of your time? I swear you won't regret it. The first news clip read, the appearance of a huge gate at Gwangalli beach has caused a panic among civilians. Another headline read, Hunters Association deliberating whom to give permit to. A third asked, the Knights Guild surrenders the Gwangalli beach raid permit. And one more headline wondered, is this a repeat of the Jeju Island nightmare? Jongsu clicked one of the many news videos and played it for me. A civilian voice in the video asked, over there, look, are you filming this? Another answered, yeah, I am. The first voice said, whoa, is that for real? How can a gate be so big? The video had presumably been taken by regular people whose voices were filled with fear, and understandably so, considering the enormity of the gate. It was taller than a 10-story building. While civilians had gotten used to gates appearing without warning anytime, anywhere, this one was still big enough to actually frighten people. There's really no correlation between the size of a gate and its rank, Jongsu explained once the video had ended. But we've confirmed that the incredible amount of mana coming from this particular gate matches its size. The news piqued my interest. Is it an S-rank gate? Jongsu answered. We were told it wasn't impossible to rank this one, but it still came in just below the limit. This seems to be the biggest gate to ever appear in Busan. That meant the gate was as close to S-rank as an A-rank gate could get. So it should yield a good amount of experience points, shouldn't it? Unlike me, whose heart was beginning to soar, Jongsu sounded glum. Like you've seen, the association doesn't want to give us the permit. I asked, because it's too dangerous. As you know, we have no S-rank hunters in our guild. The association just doesn't trust us to handle the gate. Jongsu paused to look at me. If you're still looking for a guild to join, I interrupted him by gesturing to the file sitting on the meeting room table. The words printed on the cover caught Jongsu's eye. List of applicants for the guild's founding members. Jongsu rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Jongsu's plan to recruit me for the Knights Guild had gone up in flames, so it was time to discuss the real topic at hand. Jongsu said, The elite hunters of the Knights Guild rival those in the Hunters Guild. The only difference is we don't have an S rank who can lead them. The Knights had done well until now, but no one knew what could happen in this raid. In the event that something unexpected might occur, they needed a high-rank hunter in their party. The presence of an S rank could turn a situation around. The man sitting in front of him, Jinwoo himself, was a prime example of this. His sudden appearance had changed the fate of the Korean team when they were facing death. Seeing Jinwoo in person, he seemed thoroughly reliable even in the eyes of a fellow hunter. Jongsu wondered, would he give me an autograph if I asked for one? Jongsu understood why Yerim had suggested they ask Jinwoo for an autograph even if he rejected their proposal. Is there something on my face? No, nothing. Jongsu laughed and waved it off. If you join our strike squad this one time, Hunter Sung, we can do this raid. I crossed my arms and leaned back. Before I could mull it over, Jongsu hurriedly added, of course we would give you proper compensation. He produced the contract he had brought with him. We'll give you 20% of the profits. A large guild offering an individual 20% of their profits from a dungeon was an excellent offer most couldn't even begin to dream of. When a large guild raided a dungeon, an S-rank hunter would usually receive around 10%, but the Knights Guild was offering me double that. It was certainly a lucrative offer. However, I had a different idea. 50-50. Jongsu was in the midst of taking out a pen. His hand quivered. Pardon me. If you treat me as a guild and not a person, I'll cooperate. I spoke firmly. Jongsu agonized over the counter-proposal. Show. Gah. However, Jongsu couldn't play hardball like Jinwoo. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that the fate of the Knights Guild depended on this raid. I tutted to myself. 20%, isn't it? It wasn't that I was attempting to take advantage of the Knights Guild's desperate situation. I was merely offering the most equitable split after taking everything into consideration, and that was 50-50. Not even the elite members of the Knights can hold a candle to my shadow soldiers. They were no match for my soldiers either in quantity or quality, and that was before adding me into the equation, meaning 20% would basically be working for free. This would be a fair and beneficial deal for both parties. Why would I agree to anything less and undervalue myself? Jongsu tried. How about 40-6? I cut in. This isn't a negotiation, Jongsu asked. So you won't accept anything other than a 50-50 split? I nodded in response. Nige. Jongsu was lost in thought. Jongsu thought, I figured this guy would be easy to deal with since he's young and seems nice enough, but he understood where Jinwoo was coming from though. Jinwoo could single-handedly beat all the other S-rank hunters. That was the kind of person they were trying to recruit, so what Jinwoo was suggesting wasn't unreasonable. No. Jongsu shook his head. It definitely wasn't unreasonable. Had Jinwoo been spiteful, he could have asked for 80%. Besides, Jongsu needed this deal to go through more than Jinwoo did. It would be an unimaginably huge loss for the Knights Guild to give up on this raid. On the other hand, what would Jinwoo lose? Absolutely nothing. Jongsu felt as if he had been forcibly seated at the bargaining table by gunpoint. Considering the whole situation, wasn't Jinwoo being a gentleman by asking for only half? But that wasn't all. If this deal went through, the Knights Guild would have secured the most reliable insurance they could get. Yuntae's words from yesterday popped into his mind. Yuntae's warning returned to him. Boss, we'll be done for if it turns out to be a red gate. But if Jinwoo accompanied them, he hadn't faltered once as he dealt with several thousand S-rank magic beasts. Jongsu had watched with his own eyes what happened to the ants on Jeju Island. He did all of that, didn't he? The reality of who exactly was sitting in front of him suddenly sank in. Gulp. He swallowed hard. After what he had witnessed with the ants, how could Jongsu even think about offering a mere 20%? Jongsu thought, the rude one was me all along. Jongsu readily admitted his mistake. In his mind, he was now thankful for Jinwoo's generous offer, but his gratitude could go only so far. Since Jongsu had to surrender something, it was only fair to request something from Jinwoo in return, but what? After a long deliberation, Jongsu cautiously opened his mouth. Jongsu wore tense. Jongsu said, we will accept these terms, but in return, I asked. In return? Jongsu asked, can we leave the Magic Beast boss to you? Jongsu's face was serious as he resolved to get this one concession from Jinwoo, no matter what. Since the boss tended to cause most of the damage in a dungeon, Jongsu was willing to raise the stakes by asking Jinwoo for the sake of minimizing the danger to the strike squad. Seeing what he did in the ant cave, he shouldn't have a problem dealing with the boss alone. Jongsu pressed his lips tightly together as he nervously anticipated Jinwoo's response. As the silence wore on, his worry about being rejected grew, and his face hardened. On the other hand, I almost snorted. As I fought to keep the corners of my mouth down, I raised my hand from my chin to cover the smile threatening to escape and quickly furrowed my brow. I wanted it to seem like I was deep in thought over Jongsu's request. My ruse worked. Wringing his hands anxiously, Jongsu lost all sense of time as he waited. I finally let out a sigh like I had no choice. All right then. I waited a beat before continuing. I'll do it. Jongsu pumped both his fists under the table. Jongsu thought, we did it. He felt as if all his worries and concerns had washed away. Why had he dragged this matter out for so long? He should have opened with this. Ever since they left Busan, Jongsu had been tense, but he now wore a big smile on his face. All that was left to do was contact the association about the raid permit. With Jinwoo joining the strike squad, there shouldn't be any obstacles. Jongsu said, the gate was discovered a while ago, so we should get the raid started tomorrow. I said, I'll see you then. Oh, Jongsu paused from packing up his items. Why don't you ride down with us in our car? He figured it would be more efficient to go together rather than make arrangements for travel, schedule a meeting place and time and all that. Jongsu added, we can put you up at the most luxurious hotel in the area. But I didn't need to suffer through a long car ride. I merely had to place one of my soldiers in Jongsu's shadow. That way I'd never get lost or be late. I snuck a peek at the circular shadow making its way across the floor as I offered up an excuse. I have an errand to run this evening, unfortunately, Jongsu said. I see. I said I'll be there on time, barring the guildmaster himself being late, of course. At that moment, Yuntae, who was coming back from the restroom, let out a yelp. Beep, boss. Startled, Jongsu sprang to his feet. What? What is it? That shadow just moved. From that side to that side. Jongsu paused, then glared at his vice master. Yuntae, have you been drinking? Yuntae fell silent. Here's. Yuntae was at a loss for words at the cold reception and sheepishly scratched his nose. Jongsu pressed him. I asked if you've been drinking, Yuntae admitted. I only had a couple cans of beer at the rest stop, boss. Jongsu said, didn't I tell you to be careful when we're on official business? I'm sorry, boss. Yuntae bowed apologetically to Jongsu and me. My apologies, Hunter sung. Jongsu bowed to me as well as he kept Yuntae's head pushed down. Please allow me to apologize for the disruption. Yuntae is a good guy but sometimes talks nonsense when he drinks. I said no, it's okay. Shadows can move around sometimes, I'm sure. As they were about to conclude the meeting on a good note, my cell phone began to vibrate on the table. Frrr. Who is this? I checked the caller ID, but it was a number I had never seen before. I said, excuse me, I need to answer. Jongsu said, please go ahead. The nervous Jongsu and noisy Yuntae simultaneously breathed out sighs of relief as Jinwoo politely excused himself from the room. Yuntae muttered, I'm telling you, that shadow was really moving. Jongsu snapped, drop it. His glare shut Yuntae up. After a brief silence, Yuntae's curiosity got the best of him. So how did it go? Jongsu answered, how do you think? Of course he decided to join the raid. That's great. Yuntae's expression went from anxious to excited. Smiling, he inquired, by the way, did you ask him about joining our guild? Jongsu said, forget it. He said he was making his own and showed me this form. Jongsu picked up the file of applicants like Jinwoo had. Yuntae chuckled. With all the guilds already established, how much can this guild be expected to grow? If he joined us, he'd be treated like a king. He's going through a lot of trouble for nothing. I agree. As Jongsu pursed his lips in disappointment and moved to put the file back, an application fell out. He winced and quickly picked it up but then froze. Jongsu blinked. Huh? The picture of a woman attached to the application was one he knew well. Oh, Yuntae was stunned as well. Boss, isn't that porn? He still couldn't believe what he was seeing, but Jongsu nodded in confirmation. Jongsu said, yeah, it's the vice president of the Hunters Guild. Yuntae quietly stared at Haein's picture before glancing at the other man. Boss, maybe we should let them acquire us. Jongsu immediately scowled. Oh, shut up. Outside the office, I answered the call, and a familiar female voice came from the other end. My mother said, "Hello, dear." Upon hearing the voice, I felt relieved and strangely disappointed at the same time. "Did you buy a cell phone, Mom?" My mother answered, "Yes. I called you because I had a sudden desire to hear my son's voice as soon as I bought it." "Are you busy? I'm not interrupting anything, am I?" I glanced back at the two waiting men from the Knights Guild and smirked. Not at all. My mother said, "That's a relief, but I'm not sure if this was a good idea. I still can't get used to this kind of thing." "Did you go to the store on your own? You didn't take Jinah with you?" My mother replied, "Why bother her when she's busy with her studies?" It'd be nice if my mother thought less about her kids and more about herself sometimes. I sighed to myself as I ended the call. So, why was I so disappointed that it was my mother calling? Who was I expecting it to be? I smiled as I put my phone in my pocket and then looked up. The twinkle in my eye was back. Thanks to the men from the Knights Guild, I'd be able to breathe in the air of a dungeon once more. An A-rank gate that's closer to an S-rank, they said. Though, it felt like forever since my last proper workout. Had it only been a week since I got back from Jeju Island? I'd cleared one B-rank red gate since then, which had been nothing special and had taken very little effort. Ba-dump, ba-dump. I hadn't felt my heart racing like this in a while and found myself looking forward to tomorrow's raid. All the elite hunters of the Knights Guild were gathered at the meeting place. They were excitedly anticipating the raid, and for good reason. This was a gate that could jeopardize their lives, and if it turned out to be a red gate, they wouldn't have an escape route. But everything would be okay because Jinwoo Sung would be joining them on this raid. Yes, Yerim had let out a scream of joy as soon as she heard the news. The other hunters had also expressed their delight in their own ways at the deployment of this ultimate safety net. Only one person was anxious here, Jongsu, the guildmaster, who nervously awaited him. Jongsu thought, "Damn it, I should have just made him come with us yesterday." Jongsu checked his watch. It was 5 minutes to 11. The raid was supposed to begin in 5 minutes. Jinwoo had said he'd be there on time, but Jongsu could see neither hide nor hair of him. His stomach began to churn. They couldn't even begin without Jinwoo. The association had immediately handed over the permit when they were informed of Jinwoo's participation. Such was the influence of the S-rank hunter's name. So to go in without him. More importantly, Jongsu looked at the faces of the strike squad, their eyes bright and eager. The strike squad themselves could end up boycotting the raid even before the association could cancel it if Jinwoo didn't show. 3 minutes left. Jongsu anxiously fished out his cell phone but forced himself to be patient and put it in his pocket. Surely it was rude to call someone who'd already contacted him 10 minutes earlier and said he'd be there soon. But Jongsu couldn't sense a powerful presence in the area. The guildmaster searched for something to calm his nerves and ended up with a cigarette in his mouth. Jongsu wondered, "Where in the world are you, Hunter Suung?" Meanwhile, I exited my apartment building. I wore comfortable clothes and sneakers. When I checked the time, it was 1 minute to 11. As I looked up, I saw gray clouds gathering. Had Jinah taken an umbrella with her? But that thought was fleeting. I should get going. I pulled up my hood and smiled. First, I activated stealth, and then shadow exchange. I swapped places with my shadow soldier. At Jinah's high school, 3 male students were annoyed at having to run an errand for their art teacher. One student grumbled, "Isn't this forced labor?" Another agreed, "Yeah." A third complained, "Why are we doing his job for him?" Despite their complaints, they arrived at the second art classroom, which was currently being used for storage, and unlocked the door. One of them coughed. "Oof, the dust." Another groaned, "Ugh." Since the room had been unused for quite some time, they were met by a big cloud of dust. Worn art supplies, abandoned drawings, and model statues used for sketching were scattered throughout. One boy asked, "How many statues did he ask for again?" Another answered, "I'm guessing 6, since there are 6 groups." The first complained, "Come on, even if we each carry one, we'll still have to make 2 trips." The other said, "I mean, unless you can carry 4 at once." They rolled up their sleeves, but when one of them moved to grab a statue in the far corner, something caught his eye. The student muttered, "Huh?" The others also came closer at his strange tone. One of the others said, "Hey, that's..." There on the wall was a large black hole. It was a gate about the size of a person. The biggest of the 3 students inspected the gate and laughed. It's no big deal. He placed his hand on its surface and said, it's a closed gate, so it's perfectly safe. No one can go in except hunters, and nothing can come out. Yet, at that moment, a sharp crack rang out. A crack appeared on the surface of the gate, and a hand shot out to grab the student's head. Huh? The student managed, huh? He struggled, but the hand wouldn't budge at all. And then, a sickening crunch followed. Huh? There was a sound similar to a nut being cracked, and blood sprayed everywhere. Gee! One of the other students screamed, Junsuk. When the 2 other students screamed as they were splattered with blood, the black surface of the gate shattered like glass, and magic beasts started pouring out into their world. Orcs were natural-born predators. Although their intelligence level was below that of humans, they were far superior at tracking and hunting weaker prey. And now that the barrier that used to exist between this world and the dungeon, was gone, the predators spilled out. The first orc growled. Another answered with a low growl. The orcs used their feet to push aside the dead bodies of the boys who were obstructing their path and surveyed their surroundings. The orcs sniffed the air. One rumbled deep in its throat. The orcs had been holding their breath for an entire week as they sat in the darkness of the dungeon. No wonder they were so worked up by the smell of flesh and blood all around them. However, this group was just the reconnaissance team. As much as their blood boiled, they had tread carefully as, behind the circular portal, dozens of their kind awaited their report. Straight walls lined with many doors and windows. The leader of the reconnaissance team noted immediately how the building they were standing in had a complicated layout similar to a castle. Grrr. The beast's nostrils flared. He had 2 choices. One was to immediately leave this hall to slaughter whatever prey they could get their hands on. The other was to kill all the humans within this castle, make it their fortress, then go forth and hunt. It was clear which was the safer choice. The leader barked at one of his subordinates. Bring forth our brothers. He then looked up at the ceiling. The beast's ears twitched as he listened for sounds from above. 1 floor up, then 1 more, and even beyond that, the building was filled with prey. His head throbbed from the voice echoing in his head, incessantly urging him to slaughter. All right. He parted his lips and bared his fangs. We'll start by clearing out the inside of this building. A crowd had gathered at Gwangalli beach. Despite the gloomy clouds overhead, people's attentions were solely focused on one thing, the large gate that had appeared on the beach. The local police force and the Busan branch of the Hunters Association had cooperated to set up a barricade prohibiting civilians from entering the area, but the number of onlookers continued to grow anyway. The new employee whimpered to his supervisor, "Boss, are we supposed to deal with this every time a gate appears?" But the supervisor was similarly taken aback by the situation. They had never seen it this busy around a gate. We're just going to have to deal with it. It's because this is one of the biggest gates to ever appear in Busan. They then peeked over their shoulders at the immense hole suspended in midair. It felt like they might be sucked in if they stared at it, so they were doing their best to ignore it. Of course, a gate can't hurt anyone unless a dungeon break happens, though. Even so, they detested these things, kind of like how some people had an irrational fear of the ocean or outer space. That's why, whenever they were out in the field, the sole preoccupation of the pencil pushers was a fervent wish that the hunters would deal with the ominous holes. In that vein, there was one aspect of this specific raid that put them at ease. The rookie said, "Oh, boss, did you hear?" His supervisor asked, "Hear what?" The rookie said, "I heard an S-rank hunter from Seoul is on his way." Who hadn't heard about that? The supervisor estimated that about half the crowd was here to see the gate and the other half was rubbernecking to see the S-rank hunter. The supervisor asked, "Hunter Jinwoo Sung?" The rookie answered, "Yes, him." The supervisor Seoul is arsed. "Do you know him or something? Why you're so excited?" "No." The rookie blushed and frantically waved his hands. "To tell you the truth, it's going to be my first time seeing an S-rank hunter, so..." The supervisor sighed, exasperated. "Hunter Sung is a newbie just like you, so why you're so different from him?" The rookie protested. "Boss," the supervisor said, "if you've got the energy to chit-chat, why don't you make yourself useful and help out by putting in some overtime?" The rookie said, "I'm taking a break because my leg hurts from being on my feet all day." The supervisor clicked his tongue as the rookie's reproachful glances made it clear he felt wronged. Though his superior didn't think this new guy was particularly reliable, the rookie's enthusiasm was somewhat understandable. The supervisor admitted, "I'll admit I'm a little curious about Hunter Sung too. Everyone's talking about him." The rookie asked, "You too, huh, boss?" The supervisor said, "I mean, he single-handedly defeated the boss of an S-rank gate." Technically, the Queen Ant was the magic beast boss of the dungeon on Jeju Island. However, the battle with the monstrous mutated ant had left such a strong impression, many of those who'd watched the live broadcast of that raid mistakenly took it for the boss. Killing the boss closes the gate, so in the people's eyes, Jinwoo was a hunter who could close an S-rank gate all by himself. No wonder there were rumors Jinwoo's power was up there with the national-level hunters. It was only natural that he was getting all this attention. The rookie said, "To think, an S-rank hunter is coming. I wonder what it's like to see one in person." The supervisor was a little unnerved by the rookie's sparkling eyes. Did he apply to the association to stalk hunters or something? Oblivious to his superior's petulant gaze, the rookie's eyes kept on shining, and he continued enthusiastically. The rookie called out again, "Hey, boss." The supervisor asked, "What now?" The rookie asked, "I've heard it's super difficult to look an extremely powerful hunter in the eyes. Have you ever run into an S-rank before?" After a beat, the supervisor answered, "I have." The rookie said, "Wow." The elder man, who'd initially found this exchange bothersome, puffed up with pride at the newbie's odd response. The rookie asked, "How was it, sir? Were you really scared?" The supervisor began, "Man, tell me about it. I met Hunter Dongwook Ma of the Fame Guild last year while on official business." A hooded passerby said, "Excuse me, I just need to get by." The employees answered, "Yes, of course." The two association employees quickly parted to let a man pass between them, then stepped back into place. The supervisor looked back at the hooded figure who'd just passed them. "Huh?" The rookie asked, "What's wrong, boss?" The supervisor said, "Nothing, I just thought he looked familiar." The rookie said, "Huh? That's weird. I thought so too." The supervisor asked, "Does he work for the association?" The rookie murmured, The supervisor asked, "Hang on, where was I?" The rookie prompted him, "You were saying about Hunter May from the Fame Guild?" The supervisor said, "Oh, right. I had a chance to meet Hunter May in person, and he was such a huge guy that his shoulders were this wide." The rookie said, "Whoa." Turns out, the supervisor and the trainee were birds of a feather. Jongsu called out, "Hunter Sung." Jongsu Park was so happy to see me that he sounded nearly tearful in a way unbecoming of a man in his 30s. It reflected just how high the stakes of this raid were. I calmly checked the time as Jongsu greeted me overzealously and watched as the numbers on my cell phone changed from 10:59 to 11. Good. I smiled. Although I'd taken a roundabout route using stealth in order to avoid the chaos, I'd still arrived on time. I was starting off the raid on a good note. I finally looked up and took in the sight of the gate. It's bigger than I thought. The gate was much larger in person than it had looked in the footage I'd seen, and just as the association had informed the Knights Guild, the amount of mana radiating from it was extraordinary. What kind of magic beasts am I going to find in there? I couldn't help but grin. Beyond the gate's unusual size, nothing else about it seemed out of the ordinary. As one would expect at any raid, there were two groups of low-rank hunters standing by. That's the collection team, and that's the excavation team. The more knowledge one had, the more they noticed. And thanks to my time with the Hunters Guild, I was easily able to tell the groups apart based on their uniforms and tools. And there are guild personnel busily running around as always. Indeed, experience was the best teacher. A hunter exclaimed, "Whoa." Another said, "He actually came." A third asked, "Mr. Jinwoo Sung." Having been called over by Jongsu, the elite hunters began gathering around me, their faces lighting up as soon as they recognized me. As I briefly greeted each hunter, I sized them up. I counted 30 high-rank hunters. Just as Jongsu had confidently explained, the quantity and quality of the Knights Guild A and B rank hunters was on par with the Hunters Guild. Of course, I expected no less from a guild that represented an entire region of Korea. On top of that, because everyone was suited up in either armor or protective gear imbued with mana, the title of knight fit them perfectly. It was a shame such an outstanding guild was often underestimated simply due to a lack of S-rank members. I understood why President Park had hastily asked me to join the Knights Guild. By the time I snapped out of my thoughts, I was already surrounded by the other hunters. One hunter began. Another hesitated. A moment of hesitation soon turned into a competition to get my attention. One hunter blurted, "Hunter Sung, the Jeju Island raid was truly amazing." Another asked, "How do you summon those soldiers in black? Or wait, are you sure they're actually minions?" A third asked, "You're going to lead today's raid, aren't you?" I didn't know how to handle the barrage of questions. Yerim cut in. "Okay, stop. Healer Yerim, whose idea it had been to invite Jinwoo in the first place, pushed the other hunters aside and stepped forward. "You're making Hunter Sung uncomfortable. Stop acting like a bunch of newbies." She glared sharply at her colleagues. High-rank healers were just like den mothers who carried the weight of the team's well-being. The strike squad members bit their tongues and swallowed their complaints like children after a scolding. Yerim chuckled, then spun and extended her hand to me. "I'm Yerim Jung, the main healer of the elite strike squad of the Knights Guild." She grinned at me as she continued. "At the very least, I think the leader and the primary healer of the team should get along, don't you?" My gaze shifted away from Yerim, whose eyes were gleaming with an ulterior motive, and to Jongsu. "Haven't you explained everything to them yet?" "Oh, the thing is..." Jongsu ran his fingers through his hair, embarrassed. "My schedule's been crazy, what with all the paperwork and gathering everyone here." He gave an awkward laugh, then looked around at the other hunters. At least everyone in the squad was assembled in front of him, so he would have to explain things only once. Jongsu announced, "I, Jongsu Park, will be the leader of this raid." His words triggered some grumbling in the crowd. One hunter muttered, "The president again?" Another said, "But Hunter Sung is here." A third asked, "Is this really okay?" The tank Jongsu was among the strongest A-rank hunters, so it wasn't strange for him to lead a raid. In fact, except when he was under the weather, he led most of the Knights Guild raids. However, there was now an S-rank hunter in the strike squad. Common sense dictated that the strongest would take the lead. Jongsu quickly continued his explanation for his confused subordinates. "Hunter Jinwoo Sung will be in charge of our safety and guard our rear." This had been Jongsu's demand, that I ensure the squad's safety from the back of the party. This was for both the security and honor of the Knights Guild. Hunters with high combat abilities usually marched in front. Those weaker and more vulnerable to sudden attacks, such as mages, healers, or support hunters, brought up the rear. Since the Knights Guild was having difficulties recruiting rookies, the survival of these hunters was a matter of the guild's continued existence. So what if they placed me in back? The strike squad could quickly advance without worrying about a surprise attack from behind. No, they would even welcome it because the one fielding such strikes would be me, Jinwoo Sung, destroyer of thousands of S-rank magic beasts on Jeju Island. Heck, if their enemies persistently attacked from the rear, the strike squad might even be able to clock out early. That was the first reason for Jongsu's request. The second was more pressing, Sue. Jongsu swallowed hard as he observed the swarm of reporters by the police barricade. It was proof that this raid was the center of attention. If they weren't careful, people might think the Knights Guild was riding on my coattails. Jongsu thought, I mean, it's true, but either way, he couldn't have the public thinking that, because the true purpose of this raid was to show people that the Knights Guild was still going strong. That's why he had been so desperate to recruit me. And so, Jongsu relayed to his teammates, "This is something Hunter Sung and I agreed on after much discussion, so I will only entertain your complaints after the raid is done." But at that moment, an A-rank hunter stepped forward. "Hang on, sir. I for one don't understand this decision." He was a rookie who had been recently recruited to the guild. "Are we so weak that we need someone else's protection?" Blood drained from the faces of the senior hunters at his question. Gah. "Hey, kid." Confidence oozed from the young hunter, who looked to be about my age. "Is that not so, everyone?" His attitude was understandable. He was the ace of the new crop of hunters this year, and given that the accolades he'd received had been second only to those of Chul Kim, his bravado wasn't unfounded. The only problem was that he was barking up the wrong tree. "Mr. Jinwoo Sung, do the elite members of the Knights Guild seem that weak to you?" Silence answered him. I suppressed my laughter and quietly listened to what the new kid had to say. Of course, the other hunters were on pins and needles. Where is his unwarranted confidence coming from? Oh man, Is this his first time meeting an S-rank hunter? Somebody please stop him. He should know this isn't the time or place for spouting such. Seeing his seniors at a loss for words and my silence made the rookie even cockier. And you too, President Park. Jongsu pointed at himself. Me? Was it Jongsu's turn now? The guildmaster was speechless. I know S-ranks have an extremely high net worth, but why would you agree to give him half the profits? He's just one person, not an entire guild. Jongsu looked to me for help as his head started throbbing. Jongsu silently pleaded, Hunter Sung, I leave him in your hands. I gave a firm nod. The rookie continued, in any case, I don't understand the ridiculous terms of this contract. Just then, Igris materialized in front of the protesting rookie. Eek. The A-rank hunter flinched and stumbled back at the force of the magic power coming from the knight in black armor. But before he could retreat more than 2 steps, his back collided against something hard. Startled, the newbie turned to see a second knight a few heads taller than the first peering down at him. Iron. Yikes, he gasped and broke out in a cold sweat. Something next to him tapped his shoulder, and his head slowly swiveled to see a hooded figure in a black robe. The rookie's legs gave out at the dark mana emanating from Fang. I feel bad enough for him, so I'll hold off on summoning anyone stronger. The 3 knight-rank soldiers returned to the shadows with a wave from me. I then walked over to the trembling man and offered a hand. Do you understand now? The A-rank rookie grabbed my hand and clumsily got back on his feet. He nodded vigorously. And that was that. The Knights Guild strike squad and I moved to the front of the gate, but before we went in, Jongsu said, just a minute, please. President Jongsu Park and Vice President Yoon Tae-jung performed a final check on their equipment and team members. Standing in front of the gate, their excitement tamped down and there was only silence. For a moment, there was only silence. I wasn't sure since when, but I had grown to like the palpable tension right before entering a dungeon. It felt like my mind was settling. In the past, I had lived in fear of receiving a summons from the association and had avoided all phone calls. Who would have thought it'd ever be possible that I could feel this way? Yoon-tae said, we're good to go, boss. All right. Jongsu nodded and walked over to me since I was keeping my distance from the strike squad. They exchanged looks. Jongsu said, Hunter Sung. I answered yes. I uncrossed my arms and met the guildmaster's gaze. Jongsu bowed his head to me. I look forward to working with you. It was a short sentence that conveyed many sentiments. I replied in kind, I look forward to working with you as well. Jongsu and Yoon-tae entered the gate first, followed by the rest of the party. After confirming that the rest of the party was in, I strolled through. A system message appeared. You have entered the dungeon. As usual, the system message visible only to me greeted me. However, I blinked in surprise. The dungeon was made of passages big enough to accommodate lumbering giants. Although my experience in high-rank dungeons was limited, I'd luckily been able to explore one before. Based on that encounter, what puzzled me wasn't the magnitude of this dungeon, but rather its atmosphere. What's going on? For some reason, I was at ease here. I'd felt an ominous wind blowing in many a dungeon, but this was my first time feeling comfortable in one. Just then, one hunter shouted, "It's an ogre!" Contrary to my senses, the strike squad ran into danger right from the start. Another shouted, "A 2-headed ogre." A third warned, "Everyone, watch out." A magic beast that could easily be the boss of a high-ranked dungeon guarded the entrance, its red eyes flashing. The beast roared. 2-headed ogres were more than twice the size of ordinary ogres and possessed Herculean strength. The average strike squad would flee in terror upon encountering one. Jongsu shouted, "Let's go." The elite hunters of the Knights Guild leaped into action. Jongsu the tank rushed to the front of the group with his shield raised. As soon as the ogre spotted him, it swung a club that seemed to be fashioned from a tree it had uprooted. The impact thundered through the cave. The powerful impact shook the entire cave, but Jongsu, who had bulked up his muscles using a skill, braced his knees and withstood the strike. One hunter cried, "Boss!" Jongsu shouted back, "I'm fine. Then I'm going in too." Yoon-tae, the sub-tank, took a firm stance next to Jongsu. Having succeeded in getting the ogre's attention, Jongsu roared, "Attack!" At his signal, the Knights Guild's counterattack began. Arrows, spells, swords, and spears rained down on the 2-headed ogre. The enraged monster shrieked. The enraged monster went berserk. but Jongsu wouldn't allow it to focus on anyone but the main tank, and Yuntae moved quickly to block the occasional rogue attacks. The ogre stomped forward. Yuntae slid backward, his feet leaving 2 long skid marks on the ground as he blocked a kick. Thanks to him, the other hunters sustained little to no damage. The ogre let out a pained roar. Little by little, the damage dealers tore into the ogre's body with exceptional teamwork. It was clear to me why the Knights Guild had held on to the #1 spot in the Yeongnam region for so long. Eventually, the ogre began foaming at the mouth and toppled over backward with a final groan. Its body hit the ground with a heavy thud. The boss-level magic beast had gone down without injuring any of the humans. It was a flawless victory for the team. Nice. Jongsu pumped both his fists. Was it because they had a guest? Both he and his team were in the highest of spirits today. Jongsu wondered what Jinwoo thought of their performance. Jongsu thought it would be the cherry on top if their teamwork impressed Jinwoo enough to join their guild. Jongsu glanced at me, and our eyes met. The tank seemed awkward, as if I had read his mind, but after much internal debate, he eventually smiled and walked over. Jongsu said, "We'll continue after regrouping." Got it. I nodded in understanding. I could freely replenish my mana and recover stamina using potions, but other hunters didn't have that luxury. They needed a moment's rest after fighting such a strong magic beast. Jongsu gazed at the ogre with a troubled look. This isn't good. I turned to face him. This raid won't be as easy as I expected. I can't believe we had to deal with a 2-headed ogre right at the entrance. Jongsu rubbed his chin, then grinned at me. By any chance, do you know the nickname for these things? I shook my head, and Jongsu immediately answered. Jongsu answered, Gravekeepers. Was it because of all the inevitable victims who had fallen in the face of their immense power? But Jongsu's explanation diverged greatly from my expectations. It's because he gazed into the depths of the cave. To him, it felt like ominous energy was wafting out from the bowels of the dungeon. If you come across a 2-headed ogre at the entrance as opposed to the boss lair, his voice sounded worried. It means the dungeon is filled with the undead. The emergency center of the Hunters Association received an urgent phone call. The voice on the other end belonged to a teenage girl. The teenage caller sobbed. Is this the association? The staffer at the call center could tell by the sobs coming through the line that something was very wrong. The staffer answered, Yes, it is. Please state your emergency. The girl said, I'm at my school. There are magic beasts outside. The staffer asked, Outside, where are you right now? The girl sobbed, I'm hiding. I was with my friend, but my friend was, I'm in the bathroom. It was difficult to understand the girl because of her uncontrollable sobbing, but the experienced employee was fortunately able to piece her words together to figure out what she was trying to say. An alert was immediately sent to the main office of the Hunters Association. Magic beasts sighting at school. 1 victim confirmed. Caller in hiding. Could there have been a dungeon break inside a school? The staffer shuddered at the grisly thought and focused on rescuing the girl. The staffer asked, How many magic beasts are there? Are they nearby? The girl answered, I don't know. Oh, the screams. There are too many screams. Am I going to die? The staffer said, Please stay calm and listen to me. The call taker had been doing this job for a long time and knew all too well how vulnerable humans could be when their lives were in danger. In situations like this, it was imperative to remain calm. The primary objective was to steady the caller and relay instructions as needed. That was what it meant to work at an emergency call center. The staffer continued. Hunters from the association are on their way now. They will do their utmost to save you, so you must keep calm until they get there. Do you understand? The girl asked, Really? Then I'm not going to die? The voice coming through the receiver began to sound less panicked. This was a good sign. With the student in a stabler frame of mind, the staffer proceeded to ask the most important question necessary to ensure her survival. The staffer asked, By any chance, do you know what kind of magic beasts they are? The girl answered, Yes, I know. On TV, I saw them. The staffer asked, What kind of magic beasts are they? If they had dull senses and relied solely on their eyes, then hiding in a bathroom was a good idea. The one taking the call prayed that's what they were dealing with. The girl said, Their body looks like a human's, but they have ugly faces. Oh, they have green skin. Could it be? The staffer's eyes widened. Are you talking about orcs? The girl answered, yes, that was the name. Orcs. No. The staffer immediately jumped up and shouted, get out of there, right now. Orcs are. Despite the desperate prayers that had been offered, the loud crack of the bathroom door being ripped open could be heard over the line, followed by a blood-curdling scream. GR. The line went dead inside the school. The hunters are moving, but the orcs are already inside. Subscribe and watch the rescue continue in solo.